So I am here with the amazing Anna Richards from Frolicme. And Anna, I think let's start off with rather than me explaining who you are, why don't you explain who you are?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. For anybody who doesn't know, I'm Anna Richards. And back in 2015, I launched an erotic site called Frolicme. And it was a site where I really wanted to explore female pleasure, something I felt was so missing in erotica. And so I launched it with videos. We now have and erotic stories, and we have audio porn galleries and an online magazine. And
Tell me.
it's just a site for people who are curious about the pleasures of sex.
So when you talk about audio erotica, because this is something that's really sparking off at the moment, it's something that I recommend to lots of my clients who want to sort of dip their toe into pornography. A lot of times women feel that they're kind of excluded from this space a little bit, or that it's quite male-centered. And so I often say that audio erotica or erotic literature is a really nice place to start because you can allow your mind to be part of the process. When did you actually start doing that?
Oh, well, it was certainly, I'm trying to think exactly when it was. It was certainly well before the pandemic. Because I'd always had the films and the stories, for me, it was that natural extension of being able to offer a choice of media. Because I felt, because the site was very much geared up to really explore the pleasures of sex for women who, as I said earlier, I felt were sort of really not being catered for. I felt that erotica was always so important in terms of written erotica. So I thought it was that next step on to actually hear a story actually being spoken. It takes pornography to a different level.
Absolutely.
That whole immersive sense of being in this fantasy that you're actually also creating yourself in your mind, because you're not seeing anything visual. Therefore, what you're hearing becomes part of your fantasy that then plays out in your own mind.
Absolutely. And I think this is such an important part of sexuality, is engaging your mind. It's probably the most important part. And I think that what I find a lot of the time, and a book that I recommend to people very regularly, is Nancy Friday's My Secret Garden, which is out of print now, but she was really ahead of her time, in the 1970s, getting women to write in about their erotic fantasies. And you just see how creative women are and how we have these amazing erotic worlds that live inside our minds, but sometimes people are a little bit frightened to explore that. So I find that reading other people's fantasies or hearing somebody talk about their fantasies is like a really gentle way to allow you sort of a space at the table, if it were.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, women, this is the crazy thing is, I believe women are incredibly sexual creatures.
Oh, they are.
We've just never really had the door open wide enough to allow us to kind of fully embrace it all. And this was something, I suppose, was all part of my journey as to where I wanted to go and what I wanted to offer and so on. But I think people always think, women just aren't interested enough, or we're not. We just need the right stimulation. And we are more than interested.
Absolutely. And it's also about different, sort of styles of how you find things erotic as well. And, I think men and women, obviously, you see a man as aroused, you see a man as aroused. It's sort of like, and also that can be very reductive because men can, of course, be aroused without an erection and all sorts of things around that. But I think for women, it's all held inside, right? And so you can be incredibly turned on as a woman and keep that completely to yourself. And so there's always been this element of secrecy around that. But every woman that I have ever been friends with, when you start talking to them about their fantasies, it's always pretty fascinating, and they all go down lots of different avenues. So when you started your company, what were you doing before this?
Oh, nothing at all to do with the adult world at all. I've always been a creative. So for me, getting involved in film wasn't tricky. That was something that I always enjoyed. And if you like, I was always working in a marketing context in different brands and so on. So I kind of approached it in a way it was twofold, I suppose, both personally and from a business point of view. I just couldn't believe that something as big as the adult industry, and we all hear the numbers, beaten around about how big the adult industry really is. But for me at the time, and I was in my early 40s, I just didn't feel I was really in tune with any particular brand out there when it came to erotic content and so on. So when I sort of sat down to kind of go, okay, I want to watch something sexy, I was kind of struggling and fishing around to kind of go, well, that's not really me, and this isn't me, and there's so much out there, but there wasn't anything I felt for me. So it was that classic sort of caveat of I didn't see what I was looking for, so I decided to produce it myself.
Which I think is often the kind of the best way of doing things, because you just go, well, there's other people like me in the world, so I might as well just cater to them rather than trying to cater to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing about sex, is it's so, not one shoe fits all. And I felt that there was lots going on in certain quarters very creatively, but in terms of kind of a mainstream approach with sort of fluid sexuality, I wasn't trying to be any one sort of genre, as it were.
Right.
But I just felt still in that kind of mainstream early stages of kind of getting involved and embracing pornography, I just couldn't think of anyone. And therefore, I was looking around, I was trying to get the context of what was really going on at the time. And 50 Shades ironically, it was all at the same time the first of the books started to roll out that I had this idea. And so I was kind of gauging this whole interest, this sort of furore, as it were, at the time. And it was the fact that these books, whether you liked them or you didn't like them, and of course there was all sorts of comments at the time, but they were getting women talking. They were getting women talking in sort of their own little suburbia worlds. And they were starting to talk about floggers. They were talking about BDSM.
I remember being on the train and seeing people reading it like out on the train. They were reading a book about BDSM, and you thought, well, that's definitely a cultural phenomenon at that time, that women were feeling comfortable enough to do that. Because before then, what do you have there? Something in Boone's novels over here, which would kind of be
Mills and Boone.
Mills and Boone. Thank you.
A little bit, yeah, they were bodice ripper types.
Yes,
they still were selling. I mean,
and women had an appetite, but it. Until sort of the 50 Shades came out, I don't think you had like the phenomenon of that many women saying, oh, well, I'd quite like to be tied up. I'd quite like to try this. And so it became very, very mainstream at that point, which, I think did a real favor for a lot of people to maybe open up talking about what they desired with their partners, which, is a really important thing. I mean, communication is so important. And so many people don't really recognize that, like, you need to talk to somebody, work out what you guys might like to do together. And I'm such a big advocate of self-pleasure as well. And, really harnessing that and really cultivating that within yourself, because how are you going to know what you like if you don't even know how to do it to yourself? How's somebody else supposed to do that? That's, going to be a nightmare. So something I saw on your website that I found really interesting is, twofold really, was talking about socially acceptable pornography, and then also ethical pornography. And so I think, they're definitely like words that come up for people, and sometimes people don't really know what that means. So for you, what does socially acceptable mean? And also, how does like a normal person navigate the pornography world and go, this is ethical? I'm always shouting at people saying, pay for your porn,
that's one step.
Yeah, it's one step in the right direction. But I'd love to hear from somebody who's an expert like yourself.
Okay, well, it's interesting because nobody talked about ethical when I started my journey. It was something that really kind of came out of COVID, actually, and started to be something as we started to become more embracing of understanding that sex is part of our health and well-being. We sort of took sex into a slightly different room now, where all of a sudden it was, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. You actually need to talk about it. We need to understand sex. We need to understand our sexuality. And then at the same sort of time, people started to go, well, why can't we sort of, what's wrong with porn? And I think that the difficulty was we had been so obliterated by a lot of the tube sites and the porn that is so massively available when you actually search. And unfortunately, they really do take control of so much of the search. So unfortunately, when people then said porn, what they were being presented with on the internet wasn't necessarily what they were looking for. But we associated pornography with really that free tube site, that one click to very gratuitous sort of imagery that really objectified women and so on. So for me, I was doing ethical porn from the very beginning. I just didn't realize this was something I could go, look, this is ethical porn, and try and teach people where the difference is. And probably the simplest way when you say ethical porn is probably to say porn without guilt. So all the things that we're concerned about with porn, consent, the well-being of everybody on set. Are they all aware what's happening? Are they involved? Are they paid well? Are they looked after? Is their well-being considered? And all of those things are actually all wrapped up in ethical porn. So for me, because I wasn't in the industry, I couldn't understand why we couldn't both create and consume porn ethically. Why can't we? It's no different from probably shooting a commercial, but there's sex in it. Okay, the middle bit, there is actually going to be sex, but you've still got all of the other aspects of your shooting a short film.
Of course. And as a consumer, aside from a company telling you we're ethical, is there anything that you can kind of look out for, for people who are maybe nervous to look out and look into getting pornography for themselves? What are sort of some maybe red flags that you go, best avoid it? Obviously, the free thing is a place to start. And maybe some things that you go, really actively seek this out so that you can feel that you're consuming something that's consenting between everyone.
Yeah. I think you do have to be very careful because like all things in life, a lot of people take it as a bit of a buzzword. Ethical is all of a sudden, oh, we're going to slap it on here. We're going to say it's ethical. And then you look and you go, it's not ethical. So I think, first of all, ethical is a bit like fair trade.
Yeah.
It's about the production. How has something been produced? So anybody who isn't actually producing their own pornography. So I actually produce the films that you see online. I'm there on set. I've got my own team. We're a very female-faced team. And I know these models. I'm involved from the very off as to what is actually happening. So I know exactly what's going on and how those films are produced. So I can absolutely say we have very ethical, high standards on production, and we work very frequently with many of the models. You see them.
You tend to work, so you work with quite a few of the same people again and again.
We do. You will see some. So we also continually trying to bring in new faces as well, new people we want to work with.
And I think there's something quite special about if you've got a set where people go, they want to come back. I think that's a really good sign, that people are being treated well. And then when you say you're on set, are you directing or do you sort of take more of a back seat? How do you?
I mean, I am directing, but I also do have a director. But I'm there. I mean, it's a big set now, so it's a bigger team. But I like to sort of be there. I like to be able to see the models chat, get the vibe. It's wonderful. It's great fun being on set. So that's one thing. Always look who is actually producing the films that you're looking at. And unfortunately, what you will find, anybody out there on who goes onto a site, you'll start to realize that a lot of films are licensed. So actually, you may go to a site where they say, "Oh, we're very ethical and we're producing porn for women." But if you look, they're actually showing off so many different companies and brands of different films and producers.
So they just
they're not actually producing the films. So, I mean, I will be I'll be honest. I've had a so-called ethical site reach out to me, and we were talking about they'd actually had one of my films up, and they were wanting to relicense. And I said, but I never actually licensed that with you in the first place. And I knew that they'd taken my film, actually had it on their site, and they had no idea about the legalities that I'd actually undertaken to ensure all of those models. They shouldn't have actually had my film up there in the first place.
Got you.
But neither had they done any of the legwork to make sure that everything was in order. I knew it was, but originally I didn't even know they had the film. So I think the trouble is with a lot of this licensing that goes on is, do they do enough due diligence to actually know how was that production actually produced? And were the models fairly paid? What was the situation? So I always say the absolute first off is are you at a site where they actually produce their own content?
I think that's like a really great place for people to start, because then you just
It's the easy one.
Yeah, it's the easy one, because
It's the easy one.
it's like anything, we all want to
Yeah.
do better and have our clothes not made by, people who are in slave labor and all sorts of things. And it becomes really, really murky and muddy when you try and start dissecting this. And so, same thing within any industry. And I think especially in industries where, unfortunately, we're still a little behind on how we treat pornography and sexuality and things like this. So there is always going to be an underground nature to these things until they come more into the light. And so by coming to somebody like yourself and really going, okay, they produce everything from start to finish. Just like if you went to a clothing manufacturing company, you go, oh, look, they literally do everything themselves. It can just give you a little bit more clarity about what you're doing. And so you can feel better about consuming it.
Precisely. And then, I mean, you picked up on the pay for your porn. That's another one. How are you actually, how is this, what you're looking at, actually being monetized? Now, if you're on a tube site, a lot of it is free, but nothing is truly free. Are they selling your data? What is actually happening? Are you finding you've got pop-ups that you don't actually want? And are you suddenly finding you click somewhere and you're on a completely different site you never wanted to be on? How are they managing the situation of malware? How are they making sure that they're protecting the site so that you as a visitor don't find yourself getting caught with something rather nasty?
I mean, my favorite email to get is when people are like, we've seen you masturbate.
Oh, I know.
Like, okay, well, first of all, I don't care. Second of all, like, women masturbating often is under a blanket. It's not nearly as expensive as men. So if you're not going to get any money out of me, we're going to be fine. I'm just like cozy.
Yeah. No, it's, I mean, that is a great one because, I think we've all had it. It's the biggest spam type of mail that goes out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, firstly, has that particular site actually produced their content, and how are they monetizing it? I have a subscription, so there are no nasty pop-ups. People pay, and by paying, they get access to the site and they can enjoy everything that's there.
Well, that just seems like a much better system to me.
Yeah,
sure. And when you talk about socially acceptable porn, does that mean that you kind of stay within something that feels more sort of, I don't know, what is normal? To me, there's no such thing as normal, really. So what does that mean for you exactly?
What I'm trying to say when I say socially acceptable is I just am also trying to normalize sex. Because straight away there is that, oh my God, it's sex. Yes. And what do you think millions of people get up to in order to carry on living with humans?
How are we all here?
Exactly. There's this bizarre sort of situation of we can't talk about sex, but actually we need to encourage people to talk about sex. We need to encourage people to have sex.
Absolutely.
Because it is, I could spend hours talking about the need of having sex, but I do find it fascinating that then all of a sudden we've got to shut doors and we can't talk about it, and it's taboo. So I just want to normalize sex and actually stop this ridiculous context that sex is bad and it's the evil and so on. Let's bring it out into the fore and go, it's fun. It's everything we should be having. But I also feel that we need to be realistic. And I think I'm very conscious of trying to show realistic depictions of sex. So I think, at the end of the day, a lot of the pornography out there has sadly taken sex really down a bad route. And therefore, with it, all the other issues that people now have with pornography. Because actually, there's nothing wrong with porn. There's nothing wrong with watching porn. It's just how we portray it and how we make it.
Yeah.
And other than that, really, it's for me, I just feel that it's a natural libido booster that
Absolutely.
we actually need.
Absolutely. And I think, there is something where, of course, there's going to be people who have fetishes in a certain direction and people who enjoy consuming things that are maybe considered more hardcore. And, if you have a healthy attitude towards sex, a healthy attitude towards your own body, you can go, this is entertainment. This isn't like a sex education video. And I think, unfortunately, because there really is I think there's a huge problem with how people educate children around sex, and that they really only talk about negative things that can happen to you and what to avoid. So as a young woman, growing up in America, sex education was very much like, I grew up in California, so it's still very progressive, but it's like it was still boys in one camp, girls in the other camp. We never discussed anything together. So it was already separating everybody out from each other. And it was like, don't get pregnant, don't get STDs, don't get raped, and then to boys, it's like, don't get someone pregnant, don't get STDs, don't rape anyone, and it's just like,
it's so polarized. It was just.
And where's the people we're going to talk about, like, this is the most beautiful thing that you can do to connect with yourself or another human being. Like,
where it was pleasure.
Yeah.
And it's pure nobody talked about it.
Nobody talked about it. And it's like almost because they were like, oh, it's encouraging children to have sex. Newsflash, kids are going to have sex anyway. So wouldn't you prefer that they did it how they enjoyed it? And I've got a lot of family in Denmark, and the way that they talk to their kids there is just like completely different, and it's made such a difference to them being able to be really sort of autonomous about what they want for their bodies as young adults, and I'd like to see more people being able to do that so that you get to an adult and you can really enjoy yourself. So what was your family like growing up? Were you guys quite an open family, or is this kind of something that you sort of took control of as an adult?
Yeah, sadly not. I think, sadly my parents aren't alive anymore. But when I was growing up, sex education, you talked about your sex education. Mine was non-existent too. It was scary. I remember my sister sort of coming home once saying she'd seen one of the classes. They had to have a show where seeing a woman who was pregnant giving birth, and I think that almost put the fear of God into her.
I had the same thing. I've never had kids.
Going to have a baby.
I never had kids, and I think that was a big part of it. I was like, oh my God. And then I remember the science teacher going, and you're not even going to see when they give birth to the placenta. And I was like, yeah, okay, great. I just don't want to do that. And that was the only thing we actually watched with the boys.
Yeah. It's bizarre. And the other problem we always had was they would go and get the sort of the geography teacher in to come and have the conversation about a condom and a banana and something like that. And you could see that they were almost as more embarrassed than we were. And then it was sort of any questions, and who was going to put their hand up to ask the geography teacher that you were then going to have in the next lesson about something a little bit more personal. And so, it was just lacking on every front. So sadly, but I find this actually with so many people that I chat to, particularly of sort of my age group, and who are now doing some phenomenal things in the world of sex. And it's often been, when we've chatted, that they got to a point where it was suddenly a daylight dawning. It was like, wow, this is really what it's about. I can't believe this. I'm now really going to get involved. And they set up platforms, they set up apps, they set up all of this educational programs, because they felt, my goodness, there was so much missing in their early life that they don't want that to happen to other women in particular going forward. So, yes, it was non-existent for me. And really, look at me now. But so much of my pleasure has been something that I found during my journey. And I suppose that was, again, another big reason why I hit my 40s and sort of thought, where is it for me? Where is it for a woman like me? What's out there? And because there wasn't anything, there are very, very few female producers. There are very, very few female directors. There should be more.
There should be more. I know, Erica Lust, obviously, and you've got Four Chambers, who kind of do more indie girl stuff. Ashley does great stuff as well. So, I think it's definitely moving more into that direction. And I worked in the sex industry myself as a stripper and as a dominatrix. And so, you also see that most of the time, a lot of the money is being spent by men on these types of things. And because the women's market is untapped in certain areas, so I think with pornography, because it's something that you can do personally, women should be more involved in this industry, because there are so many women who want to see things, whether you are, a lesbian and you want to see lesbian porn, or you want to see bisexual porn, or you want to see heteronormative porn, or you want to see self-pleasure and you actually don't know what to do to yourself. So it would be really great to see somebody doing that to themselves and then get some ideas from it. There's so many different ways to approach this. Something that I saw on your social media, which I was like, yes, this is brilliant. Even though I do not have children myself, I ran a company called House of Vixens, which is a erotic cabaret company for many years, at the same time as stripping. And whenever one of the women would get pregnant, I'd be like, amazing. Because we're going to do something that celebrates the beauty of pregnancy, you know? And I think there's something really interesting of the puritanicalness of America. I think you have it over here as well in England. You know, as soon as a woman is pregnant, as soon as she has children, she's basically completely desexualized and sort of looked at as like, you're no longer, you know, I can't fuck you in the same way I used to. I can't do this. I can't do that. And it's completely absurd. And then when you go over to different cultures in places like France and Italy, if men see that you're pregnant, if they see that you have a child, they're literally like, she fucks. Like,
Well, yeah.
you know, and you're like, there's proof. Like she fucked me too. You know, so it's like you're this total sexual being, and it's completely different. And you know, I have friends who've gone over to, you know, Europe, and they're traveling and they're pregnant, they have a small child. Like, I get hit on left, right, and center. And when I'm in America or I'm in UK, I'm invisible. Like, it's just completely taken away. So there's this, I think it was called Joyride, is that correct? Or Joy of Life, something like that. I can't remember.
Well, I have
Joyride's probably a different
films. Yeah. I did. It was
Joy of Life. That was it.
Joy of Life. I actually, I knew both of the models because a lot of my models are couples. Some of them are married. And actually, the two in the pregnancy, I did 3 films with them. They are married, but I knew them both before they met each other.
Oh, that's
and they were both in the industry. And then they met each other, got married, and then I discovered she was pregnant. And I went, oh my God, that's fantastic. And then I actually said, would you ever consider actually doing at a certain stage of your pregnancy, could we shoot some films? And because they knew each other, they knew us really well, said absolutely be delighted. So I've got a solo masturbation scene with just her and a fantastic, I think we used the womanizer toy.
Great.
Then we had great toy. Then we had a non-penetrative scene with the two of them, still hot as anything. And then we also had a penetrative scene with them. So I wanted to sort of show the three different ways.
It's taboo to sort of break down for people. And it's like, and loads of men find pregnant women really sexy and beautiful. Loads of women feel absolutely beautiful and sexy. And then there's just this weird, like, oh, you're going to hurt the baby. It's like, what are you even talking about? And then you'll see that people are like, oh, that's like, you know, terrible thing to sort of do, that how could the baby know that you guys are having sex? It's like, are you serious? Like, it's absolutely insane. So I was just delighted to see that existing. And I did a short film recently called The Red Room, which is currently in all festival circuits. And one of my dancers from House of Vixens also had stripped as well in the past. And she was like 6 months pregnant. And I was like, do you want to be in the film? And she's like, oh, you know, really showing now. I was like, no, fantastic. I want you to be a pregnant stripper in the film. She was like,
that's the point.
That's the point. It's great. And she was so excited. She's like, you were literally the first person throughout my entire pregnancy who asked me to be sexy while I was pregnant and not hide it. Like, so it's just, I think it's so empowering for women to feel beautiful. And the response from women, I had another really great girlfriend of mine who was 8 months pregnant and did a live show, which was pretty blasphemous. We had her sort of dressed up like a sort of pregnant nun. So we went right down that route. But people just absolutely loved it. And all the women coming up to her afterwards just going, you look so amazing. You look so amazing. You look so beautiful. And it was so affirming for her, you know? So I love that you put that on your site.
No, but I mean, there's so much as well. I mean, for a lot of women, you touched on it a moment ago, and we've in the magazine, we talked a lot about sex during pregnancy. And for a lot of women with the extra blood flow and the hormones, it is the time that they often can be at their most sexual, and they're absolutely raging for. So, you know, to not think that you can't sort of have sex and pleasure. But for me, I always like to bring back this whole thing. For me, sex is about pleasure. And that's why I also wanted to have, and I do have on the site, non-penetrative scenes as well, because some people for
pleasure
it might not be pleasurable and they're not able to, and it's uncomfortable and so on, but they can still have all the pleasure without the penetration.
Yeah. Women do not, you know, most women don't derive their orgasmic pleasure from penetration.
No.
You know, at all. And I'm like, I enjoy penetration myself, but I need other stimulation, you know? So I think also showing people, once again, you're showing people how you can still have a very healthy sex life without doing this. And it's something I come across again and again, which always makes me quite sad because I feel like there isn't enough knowledge out there, is that, women will say, oh, it really hurts when I do penetration, but they just suffer through it because they feel like that's expected. And even their partners don't know, and they clearly don't want to hurt their partner, but they think that that is the be all and end all of sexuality. And you're like, okay, first of all, it shouldn't hurt. So you should go to your gynecologist. You should make sure that there's not something that you can fix, and also there's so many, have you ever heard of like O nuts?
Yep.
So there's so that you can use that.
Many things, but also I always say that at the end of the day, you're having sex for yourself. Yes, with a partner. But the fact is, you must always have that as a mindset. And if you're not really having sex for yourself, then you've got to question it. But there's so many other avenues to pleasure. Really, I think we just and I mean we play on all of that across the films.
That's wonderful.
And I mean we did some wonderful tantra inspired films where literally, I think only because, we were putting it on the site and I did at the very, very end, there was a tiny little bit of penetration, but the whole film was all about, and they were very, very well received. So we've done a series of those. We always use loads of toys. I love toys.
Toys are amazing.
Love them.
Anybody that turning up for with a lover or anybody like that, I turn up with a bag of tricks. And that is why I tell everybody, like, I am never turning up without a bag of tricks. I've got everything in there. And honestly, I'm maybe a little bit rude about this, but men, if you don't like your partner to have toys, you got to go to therapy. Does your penis vibrate and circle around? Yeah. I don't think so. So until you got like a bionic cock, I think people use the toys. It'll be fantastic.
I think bring in the toys, and then once you start bringing in the toys, you start to realize, I mean, toys do things to our bodies our fingers just can't possibly achieve, and it's just an addition. It's not an instead of.
Cool.
Unless you're on your own, of course, then it is a bit more of an instead of.
A client recently who she had never orgasmed before, and she's had 2 children and she's been married for 25 years, and so I was kind of going, okay, well, how do you masturbate? And she didn't even really know how to do that, and which is absolutely so I was trying to help her through this. I said, well, what tools do you use? And she went, oh, well, I've never been able to do it at all. And I said, well, what toys are you using? She said, oh, I just use my fingers. I was like, what? That's going to take forever. Like, like I don't use my fingers. I'm lazy. I've got an electric toothbrush. I got a vibrator. I'm like, I'm not going to just sit there and brush my teeth.
Yeah.
I'm also not going to sit there and try and, orgasm with my fingers. It will take like literally 3 times as long and not be as intense, So it was just the permission from another woman to do that, and I think if more women were able to see your films, it would just be an additional permission. So I'd love to hear more about, you talk about this wonderful couple who you'd known for such a long time and trusted you with this incredible film, which is really a culmination of their child, like the love that they had for each other. And then, immortalizing that in film, which I think is hot as fuck and also really beautiful. What is your sort of work like with the people that you work with? Are you guys all close with each other? Is this something that you guys sort of have friendships outside of filming, or do you keep it very professional? What's your sort of mix?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, the people I work with are phenomenal. And it's one of those things that I just wish I could get across more, that actually this industry is so incredible for the people that actually work in it. And so, I mean, it's such an easy set. I mean, I took a few journalists over. I did a big shoot over in Spain in the summer, and I actually took some journalists with me to sort of say, this is what goes on. And they just couldn't believe it. They said, oh, this is amazing. They kind of walk into the kitchen and everyone's chatting around and casually eating, and somebody's off doing a bit of yoga by the swimming pool, and somebody, it's not what people maybe always imagine that goes on in a but that's okay. That's my set. So it's going to be nice and easy and everybody has a good time. So it's very relaxed because these are people I work with a lot. I want to understand the sort of sex that they enjoy. I want to understand what's their real thing. Is that person, they're brilliant in threesomes. They've got that energy. They've got that sort of lustful, consuming passion about them. So therefore you want to play to you've got to play to their strength.
Yeah.
I've got some girls that I would say, oh, you've got such great dom tendency about you. There's no point me saying, let's put you in this. I go, that's so you. And they go, oh, you're so right. And then we work to just as any when you're choosing actors, you kind of work to their strengths.
Absolutely. I want to highlight what they're best at.
I like what they're good at.
Good.
I also, as I said earlier, a lot of them are either very good friends or couples. But so it's important that they work with people they want to work with. So again, all of that discussion is had because at the end of the day, I want to really depict such great sex. This is about the chemistry. This is about seeing the best that sex can offer. And you need that natural rawness that you can get when people are really engaged with each other. And that for me is so important. And I really focus on that. So although to a degree there's a certain element of staging, I might say 30%, i.e. it's around a swimming pool or, oh, we're in the woods. So you've got a degree of staging.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talk about the sort of sex that I'm after and what it is and what's going on in their heads. And we talk about all of that. But then there comes a point when the cameras are rolling. And then I want it to try and roll as much as one can as just this is their journey that these people are on. So then you're up to all sorts of things that then sort of play out, that is just brings out the sheer pleasure and beauty that sex offers, that I hope then comes across when people are watching, and whether it's something that they can do in their own life. I mean, it might be that they'll watch a group scene and go, oh, I'm never going to be in a situation to have that for whatever reason that may be.
The admin is
but the fantasy,
trying to organize that many people, I've tried, it's hard.
Yeah. But the fantasy, they can watch that and it can play out in their mind, that they feel as if they're having that moment, and what then that can then bring into their own life as well. So it's great. And then I love getting the feedback from members sort of going, oh my God, my partner and I, my wife and I, my lover and I, we watched and just had the most awesome time, and we loved watching this, and oh my goodness, this is my partner's fantasy, and you've done it in full color, all that sort of thing. I just love it. I just love it. So it's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. And, I think that there really is something as well that, when you see things represented in art and cinema and, in literature, anything that sort of somehow touches on a bit of you feeling understood, it feels really amazing. And then when you are able to combine that into sexuality, I feel that, it's really underestimated how amazing it can feel to be fully sexually seen by another human being and really be accepted by that person. It's a truly magical thing to give somebody as a gift, and it is also something to give yourself as a gift. And so the work that you're doing is allowing people to maybe do that, because I find a lot of people are frightened to talk about their fantasies. They're frightened that they won't be loved because of them, that somebody will find them gross, that maybe they will be
judgment. It's the judgment that we all, we're human.
Yeah.
And it's that fear of being judged.
You're really vulnerable. You're really sort of, stripped down as much as you can be, no pun intended there. But, and so to sort of allow people to have a space to explore and then go, well, what did you think about that? Clearly you quite liked it as well, is it's a great thing to be giving to people. So I think you're doing amazing work.
I just wanted to say that people need to realize that when they're watching pornography, it's like a laboratory of sex.
Oh, I like
that. Actually, you're looking at all of this. You don't know necessarily what it is you like, but when you see something, and it might fall a little bit more into the sort of a kink, a little bit of fetish.
Yeah, I saw you had pantyhose. I was like, oh, that's cool.
Oh, we've played pantyhose. We've done feet. I do try and play with. Because I'm trying to give people a little taste. Now, it might be they go, oh my God, I love that, the whole nylons and so on. And then maybe they want to go off and explore that further. I tend to find that I'm not one particular, I'm trying to be broad, and actually give them little tastes, little ideas, and a little taste of what something's like. Again, it might be, we've done some fabulous BDSM scenes. Again, it's about female pleasure. You can see there are times, we as women, that there is something very, very sexy about being taken slightly out of our sort of control zone and actually feeling comfortable to have somebody take that control for us, but in a way that's only going to be giving us pleasure that we have just not explored before. And this is what I love to play with as well.
And people don't really recognize as well. I think when you're outside of anything to do with BDSM, or you've never really played in that kind of space, I think more people have played in it than they realize, because normally you have a follower and a leader. So I will often say to people, if, sub and dom just feels too, of a particular world, follower leader, somebody's doing one, somebody's doing the other. Yeah. Most of the time, if you meet somebody who would identify as feeling that they connect with being more submissive sexually, they tend not to be submissive in the real world. And very strong people. I attribute, I would consider myself pretty switchy on that, which for people who are uninitiated, is somebody who can feel comfortable being submissive or dominant. But, you have to be a pretty strong person to relinquish control. And to allow yourself to sign up for that and kind of go, okay, I'm going to just go with the flow. And there's a huge amount of trust, a huge amount of closeness. A lot of people who do play in these worlds tend to report back that they have a much stronger relationship because of it, because the huge amount of conversation and trust and, and experiencing pleasure together in a way that most people don't touch on so intensely. So, showing all these worlds is just, I think it's deeply important. And it really, I love a sexual laboratory. I feel like that needs to be your next film theme. And so what's going on next for you? What are you working on in the moment that you're excited about?
Oh, golly, constantly. Well, there's all shoots. I'm always planning shoots for the next so many months. And it all comes down to what type of scenes, whether I'm going to end up in a sort of a dungeon scene, or whether I end up in the Alps, so I'm doing snowy scenes or summertime scenes. So I've always got a lot of that going on. And then also what's fabulous is there's so much media going on as well. There's so much discussion and opportunities. I think we're starting, certainly the media are very good, not the social media, I might add, but the standard media are very good at having these conversations and actually looking and showing, do you know what? Look at women like myself, who are actually becoming quite bold and stepping forward and going, look, let's disrupt things. Why should things be like this? Why can't they be like that? And actually taking the charge and actually making a difference. And it's I feel there's almost like a little mini sort of female sexual revolution going on with the number of women I know who are changing career paths, and they might be in finance or whatever. They're leaving that and they're actually going forth and setting up a lovely brand of sex toys, or they might be creating a range of lubes, or they've created an app for menopause, or so many things. And it's the women who are behind this and really surging forward, going, let's not take this as acceptable. Let's change it. Let's create condoms that women find acceptable to have with them and therefore use, because after all, they're going into a woman's body. So let's think about it from a perspective.
Let's hope it's not toxic.
Exactly. So all these things that it's women that are going, that wasn't acceptable. I'm going to create something that I feel is right. So I think it's a wonderfully exciting time. It's just social media.
Well, exactly.
Social media.
I feel when you're talking about media as well, I feel like there was a huge shift during the pandemic, because so many people started doing OnlyFans because they were like, I have no money, I don't have a job. And suddenly the term sex work became just the blanket term across all media, where if you look at how journalists wrote about sex workers before that, it was always, prostitute, escort, porn star. They never really said sex workers. It wasn't really respected in a way. And now I can't even imagine, even the Sun and like the Daily Mail will use the term sex work, which I think is, something quite positive that came out of that people sort of started really understanding this as a job. And I really noticed as well, because I've worked, often people within sex work communities, unfortunately, tend to, because of the society judging people, there's good sex work and then there's bad sex work, and so they try to differentiate themselves and go, well, I don't do that. I only do this and whatever. And so I've always been very much, I never did full service sex work myself, which is, penetrative sex and things like that with clients. Have many friends who do. So, great on anyone who does. But I always just use the word sex worker most of the time, because I think that it's a lovely umbrella term to say we're all a sisterhood, or a siblinghood, however you want to look at it, and we're all together in this, rather than trying to we just have different boundaries and different things that we're doing. And if my life had gone a different way, maybe I would have done different types of service. So it doesn't mean anything on that. But I think that there was like a real pivotal cultural moment that changed for that as well.
Yeah. I think also for me, COVID also brought this change, this focus on looking at sex in a different context. We started to understand it as more part of our well-being and our mental health. Never before did people ever talk about sexual wellness. It's like, what did that mean? Now you can't go onto a website without there being a sexual wellness category. I'm talking to magazines where they're going, oh, we've just managed to get the editorial side to say we can bring in a sexual wellness aspect to the site or the magazine. And I'm going, that's fantastic. And all of a sudden you're seeing, sex toys were starting to flood through into all sorts of different retail outlets. But you've got this mix now of understanding that sex isn't just this naughty thing that we shut away in a room. It's actually part of our day-to-day living. So bringing out sex into more everyday life, I think, is fantastic. And understanding sex as part of our health has been the key issue, I think, for me. And I've been fully supportive of going, yes, let's see sex as being what it is for the benefits of us as people and how much we need it.
Absolutely. So my last question for you is, if you could give your 20-year-old self some sexual advice, and you could give your today self, somebody else of your age, sexual advice of how to have great sex, what would they be?
Oh my goodness. Somebody of my own age, how to have great sex? That was the question, wasn't it? I think throw away the concerns and the shame and actually go out there and have the sort of sex you've always fantasized over. I think and that was probably a pivotal time when I was in my 40s. And I think it can be for anybody out there that's in their sort of 40s journey. It's a really interesting time of our sex lives, because you sort of feel you're almost coming to a junction called menopause.
Yeah.
And you feel as if it's putting the brakes on, and you go, well, I'm either going to go one way and sort of not really be interested, or I'm going to go another way and go, okay, how can I make sex really exciting? And I was at that junction going, the children are growing up and all of this. Let's have sex for me. Let's have the sort of exciting sex. And I think that's very much where my films have come from, and the fantasies that I had about let's take sex to a different level and see it for all of the fun it can be, not just that kind of performative sort of moment and you haven't got the time and you haven't got the energy necessarily because you're busy with earlier stages of life. So 40s is a wonderful time to actually go ahead and have some of the best sex of your life, 40s onwards.
I love that. And, I put as well, like, what would you tell your 20-year-old self? But I think you kind of answered it within that as well, which is just don't be so performative. Like, enjoy
don't be
yourself.
Performative and don't necessarily worry about what the other person is always sort of thinking. Think about your own pleasure and what it is that you enjoy. Because there's nothing sexier than a woman with enough confidence to turn around and go, oh my God, if you put that finger there, you will have me on the ceiling. And the guy would just go, oh my God, okay. He loves the fact that you know your body, and he loves the fact that he is going to send you to the moon, because that's what men love to be if they're part of that. I mean, it could be a woman as well. It could be a group of people.
Any partner wants
to know what it is that you enjoy. So the more that you can tell them and communicate, this is what I love, the more they'll be delighted, and you'll have the best sex altogether.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to end. We're always going to put all of your links in our show notes. And it's been such a pleasure talking to you today, and just vital information for anybody hoping to improve their sex life. And please pay for your porn, watch more, and go
pay for your porn. Absolutely. Thank you, Sophie. It's been a lot of fun.
It has been a lot of fun, hasn't it?
Thank you.